There's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
Let the King of Glory in. Open up the door. Starts right now. So blink wide, you heavenly gates. Prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind him, and he said, behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven. And I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass. Those things which must take place. Those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about. Discussing the issues of the day. Discerning the times in which we live. From a biblical perspective and worldview. Good day, everybody. Andy White here. Here and excited to be here. I wanted to say something else and it just flipped out. It went out. It just flew out of my mind. What you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. I'm just trying to mix it up a little bit, do things a little bit differently every once in a while. But I want to welcome everybody from all across the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. I am streaming live over on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page over at facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. That's facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. If you'd like to join in the conversation over there and see what's going on the live Facebook stream, please let me know where you are watching from, where you are listening from. Hit up some of those emojis and those thumbs up and keep the activity and the interaction going over there on the Facebook page. If you were outside of the Faith FM broadcast area, the best way to listen to Faith FM, if you don't have a radio, is download the app. Get the app for your Android. Get the app for your Apple platform. Just go on over to your respective app supplier and look up Faith FM in Sag Harbor and download the app. It's a great resource to have. Listen to great Christian programming here from the east end of Long Island 24/7. It's a great little app to use, especially if you don't have a radio that picks up the signal. Anyway, there's the app. It's great to use. I know a lot of people all over the fruited plain are using it. I am going to go to the phones in the second hour. At least that's the game plan. If you'd like to write down the phone number right now, it's 631-725-2069, 631-725-2069. If you'd like to call in the second hour and throw in your 2 cents or ask a question or share your thoughts and opinions on the things that I share during the course of the broadcast as well. Also, for those of you who are on Facebook, hey, please share it around in your group pages. Invite people over to the Facebook page and catch the broadcast on the live stream. That'd be a big help if you could do that. Expand the territory, expand the stretch out the tent a little bit and share it around and invite people over. For those of you who are on Facebook, before I get into what I want to get into for the day, I do want to mention that my video producer, Debbie Whitmer, who you guys always see on Facebook, interacting with you guys and chatting and filling in information that needs to be filled in at so many points. She's not going to be with us today, and I'm going to ask everybody in the listening audience, because you know Debbie, you've heard of, you've seen her on Facebook around and stuff, and she does all the graphic work for this broadcast. She's not going to be with us today because she had a very important doctor's appointment to get to, and I'm going to ask everybody there on Facebook as well as this listening audience to please lift Debbie up in prayer. She's just been dealing with a lot of chronic health issues for a while, and she just needs prayer. Lift her up. Pray for healing. Pray that God delivers her supernaturally in her physical body. He can use the doctors, of course. That's why she went to the doctor. We thank God for doctors. But I just want to make mention of that. Just keep Debbie Whitmer in prayer that God would do a miracle, touch on her physical being. She's been just dealing with issues that I don't want to divulge any personal information. Just keep her in prayer. That's the bottom line. Just keep her in prayer. And I'm sure she would appreciate it very, very much. I know she would. Of course she would. Now, all right, having gotten that out there, as always, I've got so much to get into, so much to share. I'm almost, there's so much sometimes, it's almost, I don't know where to begin sometimes, because it's like, it's just a full, it's like going into a buffet, and you want a little bit of this, you want a little bit of that, and that looks pretty good over there. What should I go for first? But I do have something very, very important to share with you today in this audience, because in this world that's filled with conflict, as you all well know who listen to this broadcast regularly, but in a world of conflict, the hunger for peace, the hunger for peace and safety, it's going to pave the way for a cruel deception. I need to say that again. In a world of conflict, the hunger for peace will pave the way for a cruel deception. As I mentioned last week, there was a UN summit in New York about a week and a half ago. The UN summit was titled, quote unquote, a peaceful settlement. That's what they think. A peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and implementation of the two-state solution. So after about 3 days of the typical UN Israel bashing, and they released what they called the New York Declaration. It's ostensibly been decided that in about a month from now, in September, at the next UN General Assembly, numerous countries are stating that they will be declaring their recognition of a Palestinian state. It's utterly bogus, of course, and their declarations, I don't believe, will have any real or immediate meaningful impact or effect upon the Israeli government. I don't believe they will. Nevertheless, this is what's going on. But I'll tell you one thing, my friends, that I do think the UN General Assembly next month might precipitate if they go through with their declaration and the recognition of a Palestinian state. I'll tell you, there's a very good chance that what they may very well do is cause a huge increase in global anti-Israel and anti-Jewish demonstrations and attacks. There's a real threat. There's a real chance of that being the consequences of these very stupid leaders proclaiming a Palestinian state. Have you seen? I'm going to occasionally glance at the stream over there on Facebook, but have you folks seen the pictures that came out of Sydney, Australia last Sunday? Last Sunday in Sydney, Australia, hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian anti-Semites marched through the streets with shouts of "Globalize the Intifada." Some people were carrying posters with the picture of Ayatollah Khamenei on them. Yeah, the leader of Iran. Yeah, carrying posters, holding him up. When I first saw the pictures, you would have thought it was someplace in Tehran, in Iran. But no, it was Sydney, Australia. It wasn't Tehran. The pictures coming out of Australia, my friends, were mind-boggling. You can see them. Go over on the internet and look them up. But I need to tell you something. The anti-Semitism and hatred of the Jews has reached levels that haven't been seen since the Holocaust. And some of the pictures that are coming out of Gaza are reminiscent of pictures from the Holocaust. And to be very clear, because I mentioned pictures coming out of Gaza, let me be very clear. I'm not talking about the fake pictures put out by the New York Times a few weeks ago of so-called starving Palestinians. The New York Times had to retract those pictures because, well, they weren't really pictures of starving Palestinians, as the New York Times had initially claimed. But I'm talking about not those fake pictures coming out of Gaza. I'm talking about the real pictures coming out of Gaza of Jews who were literally starving to death, looking like pictures taken in the 1930s and 40s. Jews who were still being held hostage in Gaza, who were being tortured and forced to dig their own graves while the UN, along with the rest of the world, sits in silence regarding them. All at the same time, these Islamic terrorists are literally being rewarded for their murdering and their raping of Jews on October 7th, 2023, by the Western countries and by the UN, wanting to appease them by rewarding them with the state. We live in an upside-down, crazy world. Former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, made this statement in regard to the UN plan. He said, quote, "Recognition of a Palestinian state after the October 7th massacre is not diplomacy, but a moral collapse. It's a reward for mass murder and a message to Islamic terror groups. What's the message? Kill Jews and you'll get a state. This is disgraceful. This is a disgraceful decision, and it will be dumped into the trash heap of history." Close quote. Indeed. Indeed, indeed, indeed. You would think, if you were a moral and upright person, if you were a thinking person, you would think that the world would have learned the lessons of World War II, when Neville Chamberlain was deceived by Hitler. And he went around declaring, "Peace in our times, peace in our times." Peace for our time was the declaration made by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain in his September 30th, remember that date? September 30th, 1938 remarks in London concerning the Munich Agreement that he signed with Hitler. But less than a year after that agreement, my friends, Hitler's invasion of Poland began World War II. It was a deception of peace then, and it will be a deception of peace again. The rider on the white horse is saddling up, my friends. And I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. But I want to lay the groundwork before we go into a little bit of a biblical overview of the breaking of the first seal and the rider of the white horse. The 80th session of the UN General Assembly, as I mentioned a moment ago, will open up on Tuesday, September 9th. About a month from now. Today's what, August 7th or so? Roughly a month from now. The UN General Assembly is going to open up with a high-level week of meetings taking place. The whole assembly is going to go from September 9th through the 23rd. And the high-level general debate begins on Tuesday, September 23rd. That's almost to the date of Chamberlain's declaration of peace on September 30th, 1938, as I mentioned a moment ago. So, let me ask the question. When the UN meeting ends in September, will Macron of France and Starmer of Britain and Carney of Canada, will they, after they have declared, which they're planning on doing so, they say, and others, Australia's, I hear, is jumping on that bandwagon. Portugal, I heard, is jumping on that bandwagon. Many countries are jumping on that bandwagon. How many countries at the UN General Assembly will jump on the bandwagon of a Palestinian state? But Macron, Starmer, and Carney, they're kind of the ones heading it up. But after they declare a Palestinian state, will they come joyfully running out of the UN in New York and start proclaiming peace in our time? We'll just have to wait and see for that one. But France and the UK, Canada, and Australia, and much of Europe have been overrun with Muslims and Islamists who are driving this runaway Palestinian peace train. And much of the UN charade is solely for the sake of performative virtue signaling to appease the Islamist immigrants who have taken over their countries. And the way some of our politics in this country are looking, we're not far behind. But I'll leave that for another discussion. Having said all that, as far as Hamas is concerned, as they're watching all of this, as far as Hamas is concerned, these Western leaders have succeeded in making any negotiations that are worth anything impossible. The message the West is sending is, as Naftali Bennett said, attack and massacre Israel, keep the hostages, and you'll be rewarded with the state. That's how Hamas is seeing this. This is how much of the Arab world is seeing, at least the Islamists. I'll qualify that statement by saying the Islamists. Because don't doubt me on this. Don't doubt me on this, folks. This is exactly how Hamas and the jihadi Islamists see this. This spirit of appeasement is Neville Chamberlain 2.0. The peace in our times strategy that Chamberlain declared after signing an agreement with Hitler is going to make a comeback. But let me assure you, this peace train is destined to go off the rails and over a cliff. In 2017, Hamas issued a quote-unquote policy document that essentially stated that even if, listen to these words very carefully, this is in the Hamas policy document, along with the charter, which I've talked about many, many times on this broadcast. But the policy document stated that essentially, even if a Palestinian state was established in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, Hamas stressed that this does not mean they would recognize Israel's right to exist. So there's that, and we've been saying that, and we're just keeping our eyes on this because, folks, it's all prophetic. It's all prophetic. The peace train. As I said at the top of the broadcast, people are hungry for it. Peace is a good thing. Peace isn't a bad thing. But I'm going to show you in a few moments how it can be a very deceptive thing as well. Shortly after the B-2 bombers struck Iran's nuclear facilities back in June, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, Marco Rubio, and Ron Dermer, who's the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, they held a conference call that was described as euphoric. It was a very successful campaign that Israel did against Iran, and then the cherry on the cake was us bombing their nuclear facilities. But beyond celebrating the successful strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, on this conference call, they discussed a sweeping peace plan for the Middle East. And the key points of the peace plan, as reported by the Israeli free newsletter, Israel Hayom, is 5 points. I'm going to read through these 5 points. The first part was, which they've already failed at doing, really, because this is over a month ago now. But the first part of the peace plan put together by our government and the Israeli government was to end the Gazan war within 2 weeks. Well, that's not gone too well. Like I said, it's a month already. But that was the original deal or plan. Anyway, they wanted to end the Gaza war within 2 weeks and let Egypt and United Arab Emirates and others kind of take over Gaza's governance. That was the proposal. The Hamas leaders would be exiled and all the hostages released. Well, as I said, none of this has transpired yet. I mean, they're still planning on it. They're still hoping for it. But things change by the day. Israel's now getting ready to annex Gaza. That's another issue that plays into this. But the second part of the peace plan they discussed on that day, a month ago, was the voluntary Gaza emigration, that several countries would accept Gazans who chose to emigrate. And reports from the July 31st, 2025 report suggested that Israel had reached an agreement in principle with 5 countries to resettle Gazans who chose to immigrate. And those countries are said to include Ethiopia and Libya and Indonesia. According to these reports, Palestinians who would want to move could freely be moved out of Gaza via Israel and Jordan rather than Egypt. I think that's kind of a good thing personally, but that's, again, part of the plan. The third part of this plan, which is a very important piece, and I'll get into that maybe a little later, was the plan to expand the Abraham Accords. Now, this really is the biggie. And as far as the Abraham Accords go, that's really worthy of a whole broadcast on its own. But this is, as many of you know already, of course, is an existing accord, and it's progressing and it's expanding. It's an expanding peace agreement that bears keeping our eyes on, and I probably will touch upon that in the second hour somewhat. But this push for normalization has already begun with Syria and, of course, Saudi Arabia and others. Again, it's all prophetic. All of the eschatological chess pieces are being moved about on God's divine chessboard. Now, the fourth point of this peace plan was the framework for a two-state solution. Now, Israel's idea of a two-state solution and the rest of the world are two different things. And as I've already stated, it's something that's going to be hammered out by the UN in September, which Israel is going to have no part of. The fifth thing in this peace plan, because I want to go to a break right now, was that the U.S. would recognize partial Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. That's a biggie, too, because a couple of weeks ago, the Knesset voted to annex Judea and Samaria. Now, it was kind of symbolic. It hasn't actually been officially done, but they voted to do it. Now, of course, it's their land. Judea and Samaria is the land that God gave Israel. It's almost kind of silly to say they're going to annex it. It already is their land, but this is the controversy. But in this peace plan that they hammered out a month ago, it said that the U.S. would back Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, and that is already transpiring. Marco Rubio was in Israel just this past week talking about Judea and Samaria and that it belonged to Israel. I mean, he was blatantly saying it. So that's a positive thing. That's a good thing. But this is the trend lines that we're seeing. And I want to say this before I go to a break. And that goes back to how I opened up this broadcast. The world's longing for a solution to the Israeli-Arab conflict and a workable Mideast plan is something that is playing right into the hands of the spirit of Antichrist, the mystery of lawlessness that is already at work. And I'll be back with more on that after a quick break. This is a Selah moment. Think about what I said. Here's Brian Johnson with a tune called Here Is Love.
Throughout heaven's eternal day,
Hallelujah, amen. Brian Johnson, Here Is Love. Welcome back, Andy White here on the radio, tearing down strongholds. You're listening to Open Up the Doors, Integrity in Broadcasting, here on Faith FM, WGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. And I want to continue with my stream of consciousness here and talk a little bit about I went through the geopolitical and geographical issues and trend lines that are going on right now. But I want to, again, begin to show you from the biblical perspective of the things that are going on. We read in Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, "Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say with a loud voice, like thunder, 'Come.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer." Now, I want to say up front, it's not my intention to do an in-depth character sketch of the Antichrist in this broadcast. I've done many of them throughout the years. But I want to take a look at the current trend lines of where things are going right now in the world and where this current zeitgeist is heading geopolitically and geographically, particularly in the Mideast, between Israel and the Arab world. Because quite frankly, folks, biblically and eschatologically speaking, that's the center of the universe. This rider on the white horse, as well as the other three horsemen, are spiritual beings, obviously, when we read them in Revelation. The vision of John when he saw that the Lord was breaking open the seals. And the riders are these spiritual beings in the heavenly realms. Paul refers to them elsewhere as principalities and powers, spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. And this first rider on the white horse, I believe, is the spiritual harbinger of the human Antichrist, which is to come. It is the spirit of Antichrist that goes out into all the world. And what is the spirit of Antichrist? We talk about it a lot. Well, to be clear, of course, it's really several things, to be sure. But first off, and to begin with, it's a spirit of deception. Again, I'm going to repeat. It's not my purpose to do a complete character sketch of the Antichrist. But I do want to zero in on this particular aspect in this broadcast today, the aspect of deception, and how this deception is so convincing and so seductive precisely because it begins with a promise of peace and security. But it's a complete facade and a trap, a spirit of deception. We read in the Apostle John wrote in 2 John 7, "For many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus Christ is coming in the flesh." This is a deceiver and an antichrist. But this rider on the horse, as I said a moment ago, I believe is the spiritual entity, the harbinger that will bring about the Antichrist. But again, I'm focusing on the deception that's involved, because Paul tells us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that the coming of the lawless one, which is being prepared, is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing. And I want to tell you something, folks, that the very beginning of that wicked deception will be a season of a deceptive peace. That's how wicked the deception is. Oh, the irony. Peace. Everyone wants peace. Peace is a good and legitimate desire. And that's precisely what Satan's cheese is in his mousetrap. A wicked deception of peace that comes about because of the legitimate desire for peace. The first horseman of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as they are commonly referred to, and this rider on the white horse, it has to do with both a false and temporary peace and the rise of the Antichrist. It's a false and pseudo peace that comes on the wings of deceit. We read about that in Daniel. I'm going to pull out a few verses from Daniel that shows you how this interconnects with the rider on the white horse. Daniel 11. I'm going to read it out of the Holman Christian Standard Bible because I think it was rendered with such clarity. But in Daniel we read, again in the Christian Standard Bible, a despised person will arise. That's a reference to the Antichrist. A despised person will arise. Royal honors will not be given to him, but he will come during a time of peace and seize the kingdom by intrigue. A flood of forces will be swept away before him. They will be shattered as well as the covenant prince. After an alliance is made with him, he will act deceitfully. He will rise to power with a small nation during a time of peace. The description, there's more there, but that's focuses on what I want to do right now. Well, let me finish out that verse. He will rise to power with a small nation during a time of peace. He will come into the richest parts of the province and do what his fathers and predecessors never did, reminiscent of what Jesus said, a time such as never been before. The description in Revelation of the rider on the white horse, I believe, echoes this message in Daniel. He ushers in a season of peace by which he brings forth the geopolitical alliances into the alignment that need to be put into place so there'll be a sense of peace and security. Again, Daniel chapter 8, through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he will make a covenant. He will make a covenant with many for 1 week, something we talked about numerous times on here. This covenant that he makes with the many for 1 week. And this covenant, at the very least, and there's more, but at the very least, this covenant leads Israel to believe that they will be protected from the attacks and the terrorism they previously were constantly enduring, giving them a sense of security and peace. This covenant is referenced in Isaiah 28 as well. It's not just Daniel. But God says to them, really by way of rebuke to Israel, to the leaders of Israel, because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we are in agreement. When the overflowing scourge passes through, it won't come to us. It won't come to us. We've made this agreement. But God says, you have made an agreement. You have made lies your refuge. And under falsehood, you have hidden yourselves. Because the Lord says, when you say the overwhelming scourge will not pass through, the Lord says, not so, not so. God says in Isaiah 28:18, your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. When the overflowing scourge passes through, then you will be trampled down by it. Another description of the time of Jacob's trouble that we read about in Jeremiah 30 and Zechariah as well. But there's something, having said all that, there's something that I want to make mention of regarding this horseman, because I found it rather intriguing when I was looking into it. Many make a point of saying that this horseman has a bow in Revelation 6:2, but there's no mention of arrows. Now, I have never personally thought that there was much of any real significance in that personally, because the scripture says he goes out to conquer and conquering. So a bow naturally implies to me the means of arms to subdue people. So I've always just taken it as the bow was significant really in and of itself to show military prowess, because it's kind of a self-evident context. And I kind of still hold that view. However, I discovered some things that I do think are interesting. Since many have focused on the fact that there's no reference to arrows, let's examine a little bit of the breakdown of this the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6:2. The Greek word rendering the word bow is toxon, and this is its only usage in the New Testament. And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a toxon, a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out to conquer and conquering. Now, there are three things mentioned here. A white horse, which of course is used as a symbol of victory in Roman military parades. So there's a symbol of victorious conqueror, which then the second thing really reemphasizes. He was given a crown. But here's the key, and I think this plays into Daniel 11. The word for crown there is Stephanos, or Stephanos. It's a symbol of victory. It's not a diadema. We get the word diadem from diadema. When we see Jesus return, he's wearing many crowns. He's wearing many diademas. But in Revelation 6, it's not a diadema. It's a Stephanos. Now, remember what we just read in Daniel 11:22. He was not given the honor of royalty. What represents the honor of royalty? A diadema. So I think there is a connection you can make here between Daniel 11:22 and Revelation 6:2. When you look at the Greek text, I know the English just says crown, but there are different words. Stephanos, which is really a laurel wreath of victory. We see that in the Olympics of ancient times. The victors weren't given gold medals. They were given laurel wreaths on their head. Stephanos. This crown, this Stephanos, again, is a symbol of victory, but it's not the honor of royalty and kingship that a diadema portrays. But let's get to the issue of the bow before I run out of time for the second block here. A bow obviously signifies military might. In ancient warfare, the bow, the toxon, was often used to fire poison arrows, known in Greek as toxicon. Historical records tell us that the Scythian archers would smear a mixture of dung, snake venom, and human blood on the tips of their arrows, which the Greeks called toxicon pharmakon. In English, that would be rendered as a toxic drug or an intoxicating drug. We get our English word intoxicate from toxicon. I found this very interesting in light of the narrative that I'm framing today. You see, yes, my friends, the world will be deceived by the spirit of Antichrist through the intoxication of a deception of peace. The rider on the white horse is that spirit of Antichrist that prepares the way politically and governmentally for the manifestation of the human Antichrist, the zeitgeist, the rulers of the powers of the air that are going forth, even as I speak. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that the first seal has been broken or that the rider on the white horse has gone forth yet. I don't believe it has yet. But this is the trend line. The rider on the white horse, the spirit of Antichrist that prepares the way politically and governmentally for the manifestation of the human Antichrist, the son of perdition, who will literally be possessed by Satan when he finally is revealed and comes fully into power, just as Judas, the son of perdition, was possessed by Satan on the night he betrayed the Lord. This is the trend line of where all these things are going when we look at what's going on with Israel and the Arabs and the UN and all of these so-called varying peace declarations that are being thrown around. This is the trend line. And as we get closer and closer, these things will become clearer and clearer. But I'm going to go to a quick break and then close it up when I get back.
Pure heart.
The fusion of heart, mind, and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGD 90.7 and 93.3 in that peak, WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Just a few quick broadcast memos. The first hour of this broadcast re-airs today at 3 p.m. Thursday and will re-air as well at 1 p.m. on Saturday. If you missed any part of the broadcast, just keep it right here on Faith FM. And both. You can find me on both my YouTube channels and my Rumble video platforms. Just look up Andy White, Open Up the Doors on either YouTube or Rumble. Hit the little bell on YouTube and you'll be notified when we upload these archived broadcasts to both Rumble and YouTube. Please do me a favor if you watch them over there, and I hope you do. Even if you don't watch them over there, go there, give them a thumbs up, and share them around, because that's what the purpose for those platforms are, to really be a resource for you guys to share these videos around with people that that you think might be would be blessed by them and interested in them. So if you could do that, that would be great. The call-in phone number, I'll be going to the phones in the second hour. The call-in phone number, if you want to write it down right now, be the first kid on the block to call in, 631-725-2069, 631-725-2069. Just checking my clock here, seeing what time I got left for this first hour. Got a few minutes left. I'm going to try and wrap up some thoughts here. Listen, we can go into great depth with the things I've been discussing for the last 45 minutes or so. They're huge topics. I can only give you a little bit in the time I have on this broadcast. We touched upon them, really the tip of the iceberg in some ways, but I think I gave you some solid scriptural references that you can go back and look up and see how they interact with each other, see how they're really connected to each other, like Daniel 11:21 and Daniel. I'll give you those scriptures. You can write them down. Go look at this whole idea of this of the deception of peace that I've been talking about over in Daniel 8:25 and Daniel 9:27 and Isaiah 28:15 through 18. Look how they kind of like dovetail. That's the word I'm looking for. Dovetail together with the description we're given. And it's a very short description in Revelation 6:2 about the rider on the white horse. Again, I'm just touching upon these things to show you the trend lines in the spirit of the age and where this is going. People are always asking, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? And as I so often have shared in the past, folks, we're called in these last days to be the masculine, the people of understanding, who will instruct many about the things that are going on over there in Daniel 11:32 and 33. The people who have understanding. That's why I share these things with you. And we need to see how they unfold. Because whether it's the New York Declaration or the Abraham Accords or some other agreement that hasn't even come into existence yet, ignoring these events would be foolish on our part. Jesus said to, discern the signs of the times. That's what we do here on this broadcast. We discern. We try to see how things are, what the weather conditions are, so to speak. We need to wait. We need to wait, we need to watch, and we need to see how these things will play out. We need to be vigilant while we wait. That's what Jesus said, to live in a spirit of urgency. When you see all these things begin to happen, when you see all these things, not some isolated thing, but when you see all these things begin to happen, you know that your redemption draws near. And it draws near. I won't go into all that. But we know in the scriptures that for instance, the prophecy in Ezekiel 38, which talks about the Gog-Magog invasion of Israel, that when Gog and Magog invades Israel, it says that they will go up to a people of unwalled villages. Is Israel a country of unwalled villages right now? Of course not. But when the Antichrist arises to invade Israel, I believe Ezekiel 38-39 actually is the Battle of Armageddon. Well, I shouldn't say the Battle of Armageddon. It's the campaign that leads up to the Battle of Armageddon. Let me rephrase that, because the Battle of Armageddon is the last battle, but the whole campaign of the Magog military campaign actually goes on for several years, like any other war campaign does. My point right now, again, all of these things dovetail together, but the point in Ezekiel is that Gog enters into unwalled villages in Israel. Why are they unwalled? They're not today. there's going to be this peace that is so deceptive. I liked what someone posted the other day. I'm going to just quote straight from this. I saw this post the other day on Facebook, and I thought it was pretty accurate. He said, we cannot emphasize how seismic in nature these peace plan and initiatives are, and how seismic they would be for the Middle East if successful. But for the first time in its 80-year history, the state of Israel would have peaceful relations with all the nations surrounding its borders. With the Iranian regime, Hezbollah, and Hamas all gutted, and a potential, quote-unquote, potential solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in progress, this would certainly appear to be the beginning of the era of peace and safety. And it's like Brother Fred mentioned here on the Facebook stream, while they are saying, he's quoting out of Thessalonians, while they are saying peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them like labor pains. And when you, by the way, and I'm running out of time to do it now, but when you look at the rider on the first seal, the rider on the white horse, that symbolizes this bringing in of peace, what immediately follows? The rider on the red horse. And what does it say? It says it was granted to the rider on the red horse to take peace from the earth. So that's another indicator that the rider on the white horse had instituted peace. Some people say, well, the scripture doesn't say that the rider on the white horse instituted peace. But again, it's symbolic. It's a vision that John had. It's symbolic. Bring in the other scriptures with that. But then the immediate context, again, it's just basic reading comprehension. If the rider on the red horse, which comes on the heels of the rider on the white horse, takes peace from the earth, and then you see all of the graphics there, well, then you can see how Thessalonians plays into that. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them. Now, none of these, at the moment, none of these agreements, the New York Declaration, or the Abraham Accords. Well, the Abraham Accords is in effect, but so far they're basically, at the moment, pretty benign. But that in itself is prophetic. Remember what it says in Daniel. When the Antichrist arises to power, he shall confirm, he shall strengthen the covenant. It's pre-existing. He doesn't create it. He strengthens it. He enforces it. That's what the Hebrew says in Daniel 9:27 when the word gavar is used. The peace that the world is dreaming of, the UN is dreaming of, the peace that they are planning. Yes, my friends, it is a peace that's going to come. But it's only an illusion of peace. We know that real peace will not finally be had until Mashiach Sah Shalom returns. Jesus, the Messiah, the Prince of Peace. In the meantime, as even giving them the benefit of that, let me even say this. Maybe to some degree they're sincere. They're looking for peace. It's a human longing. Maybe there's nothing necessarily nefarious in these initial benign peace agreements. To some degree, I actually do believe that. When President Trump brings about these Abraham Accords, I don't believe for a moment he thinks it's some kind of nefarious thing. He's just using his human reasoning. Peace is a good thing. Unfortunately, Satan and the spirit of Antichrist, they have a different agenda. The Islamists, I'll get into this maybe in the second hour a little bit. The Islamists use peace as a weapon of war. I'll talk a little bit about Hudna in the second hour and how this plays into that. But right now, the rider on the white horse will not go forth, not until and only until the Lord himself breaks the first seal. And I don't believe personally that's been done yet. But when Jesus breaks that first seal, he's doing it. The powers and principalities, Jesus is the head of all powers and principalities. They can't do anything. without the Lord releasing them and allowing them to do it. So these are the trend lines. These are things I wanted to put out there by way of letting you know really what's going on in the world around us, which is kind of the whole idea of this broadcast. But I'm out of time, and I'm going to pick up on this theme as well as your phone calls when I come back. Thanks for hanging out, and keep it right here on Faith FM. I will be back after the news. But that's all that I've got for this first hour. In the meantime, be brave, be strong, watch, stand fast in the faith, and let all that you do be done in love. Keep it right here on Faith FM, and I'll be back.